welcome you to the First Baptist Church of Gretna. We're so glad you are joining us in our worship time and hope that this service will be a blessing to you. The Bible speaks to us about missions and how we can help others. In Mark 16:15, the Lord declares, "Go into all the world and proclaim the gospel to the whole creation." We can be part of this mission and help to spread the good news about God's love and work among us by our prayers and support. So we're collecting donations for the Alma Hunt offering for Virginia missions. These donations will be used to assist in response to COVID-19 needs. And if you wish to donate to this offering, you may provide your donation to the church office and note Alma Hunt on the check or the offering envelope. So today, as we begin our worship service, may God be glorified in our words and our praises, and may his message be heard throughout all creation.
We are tossed and driven on the restless sea of time. Somber skies and howling tempests oft succeed a bright sunshine in that land of perfect day. When the mists have rolled away, we will understand it better by and by. By and by, when morning comes, when the saints of God are gathered home, we will tell the story how we've overcome, for we'll understand it better by and by. We are often destitute of the things that life demands: want of food, want of shelter, thirsty hills and barren lands. We are trusting in the Lord, and according to God's word, we will understand it better by and by. Trials dark on every hand, and we cannot understand all the ways God can lead us to that blessed promised land. But he guides us with his eye, and we follow till we die, for we'll understand it better by and by. By and by, when the morning comes, when the saints of God are gathered home, we will tell the story how we've overcome, and we'll understand it better by and by. Temptations, hidden snares, often take us unawares, and our hearts are made to bleed for a thoughtless word or deed. And we wonder why the test, when we try to do our best, but we'll understand it better by and by. Children, by and by, when the morning comes, when the saints of God are gathered home, we will tell the story how we've overcome, for we'll understand it better by and by.
Hi, I'm really happy to be together with you again, and I want to tell you a little bit about what I'm going to do. I'm inside our house right now. Outside, I'm doing this on Friday afternoon. There's been a thunderstorm, so you might hear some thunder, or you might hear a siren go by. You could hear all kinds of things, but everything's okay. I just want you to know that. And also, I've got my computer over here. In a little bit, I'm going to turn you around so you can see it, because I want to show you some things. First, though, I want to ask you, does anyone ever say to you, Do you know who you look like? Do they say maybe, oh, you look just like your mother, or you look just like your dad, or golly, you look like great uncle so-and-so? Who do you think you look like? Well, I think you look like you, which is perfect because you're you. So who else should you look like? You're just right the way you are. What does Jesus look like? Well, we don't really know exactly, but today in our worship service, we're going to read something from the book of Matthew, which is a book in the Bible, and I have my Bible here with me, that was written about the life of Jesus. And in that book of Matthew, Jesus says some things that are really important and that say something that's a little hard to understand about what he looks like. In this book, Jesus says that whenever you take care of, whenever you help people who are hungry, people who are poor, who need clothes, who are sick, anytime you give help to people who are suffering, you are helping me. So to me, that says that when we see and help people who need help, we're really seeing Jesus. I'm going to turn you around now because I want to show you some pictures. Ready? Here we go. Don't get dizzy. Here we go. I hope you can see that okay. These are some pictures on my computer from a trip that I took a while back to a country called Haiti. Excuse me. And Pastor Bob and I have both gone to Haiti. It's a country out in the middle of the ocean. And the people there are very, very, very poor. But the children are just like you because they love to play and they're funny and they're growing and they're doing all the things that children do, except that they are so poor that they have almost nothing. This little boy and girl are in their street. And it doesn't look like your street, does it? Because it's full of gravel and rubble, but that's their street. This little boy is holding some jugs in his hands that he's taking way, way, way down the path from his house to fill with water, and they get really heavy when they're filled with water, to carry them back to his house because they don't have water at their house. This little girl was so funny and so nice and so much fun to be with. And in her eyes, I felt like I saw something about who God is, just like I do in your eyes. And this family of children, they're a family because they live together with the woman in the picture who is their grandma, and she takes care of them because in Haiti, a lot of the parents aren't able to be with their children anymore. They've been very sick or something really hard happened to them. And so the children live with grandparents or other relatives, and they have so very little. Here's a little girl who is getting the first new dress she's ever had. It was her birthday, and she was just so excited to have a new dress. This little boy is living with this woman and her husband, who are not his parents, but who are raising him because he doesn't have parents anymore. And he was so proud to show us his home and all the things they had there. Outside the house, this is what the yard looks like at the house. Doesn't look like your yard, does it? It's kind of in a jungle, and it's very rocky, and he has to walk way down the hill, down the path to get to his school. But I'm telling you all of this to say that these children, aren't they fun, are so much of who Jesus is because they are ready and eager and willing to take what they're given and become more of who God has made them to be. They'd never had puppets before, so we made puppets. These are some children who were very excited about my sunglasses, so they took turns wearing them. Look at this. She really loved those sunglasses. And these little boys wanted to be sure that we met their chicken, and see the little chick on top of the chicken, which they keep tied up because they need to make sure the chicken doesn't get away, because they have to have the eggs that the chicken lays so that they have food to eat. These children are in their room. They stay together in this room, and it's made out of bricks, made out of some kind of cement, held together by a kind of mud. That doesn't look like your room, does it? But these children are just like you. This little girl had never had new hair barrettes before, and so she was given a gift of some new hair barrettes that she was very excited about. And now this little boy, and this is the last picture, is a little boy I met in the city out on the streets, because that's where he lives. He lives on the streets because he doesn't have his parents, and there's really nobody to take care of him. This is a church where he's sitting, and the people in the church give him food to eat and help him survive because that's all he has. He was a very special little boy, and I really felt like I had learned a lot about God by meeting him. I'm going to turn you back around now, because I want to say to you that this is a little hard to understand, I know, but I wanted you to see these children who are really going through a lot of things that probably nobody we know here will go through. But when we help those children, we knew that we were helping Jesus. And you can do that too. You don't have to go to Haiti. You can help anytime you see somebody who's feeling lonely or sad. You can pray for people. You can make pictures to give them or write them a story. Any way you can help people who are needing a little something else, that is helping Jesus. I'm so proud of how you're growing and how you're becoming all of who God made you to be. And you help us understand more about who Jesus is too. So you have a good week. I hope to see you soon. And thank you so much for being you. Bye-bye.
From Psalm chapter 1, verse 1 and following. Blessed is the one who does not walk in step with the wicked, or stand in the way that sinners take, or sit in the company of mockers, but whose delight is in the law of the Lord, and who meditates on his law day and night. That person is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season, and whose leaf does not wither. Whatever they do prospers.
I'm reading from today's English version, Matthew 5, 1 through 12. Hear the words of our Lord. Jesus saw the crowds and went up a hill, where he sat down. His disciples gathered around him, and he began to teach them. Happy are those who know they are spiritually poor. The kingdom of heaven belongs to them. Happy are those who mourn. God will comfort them. Happy are the meek. They will receive what God has promised. Happy are those whose greatest desire is to do what God requires. God will satisfy them fully. Happy are those who show mercy to others. God will show mercy to them. Happy are the pure in heart. They will see God. Happy are those who work for peace among men. God will call them his sons. Happy are those who suffer persecution because they do what God requires. The kingdom of God of heaven belongs to them. Happy are you when men insult you and mistreat you and tell all kinds of evil lies against you, because you are my followers. Rejoice and be glad, because a great reward is kept for you in heaven. This is how men mistreated the prophets who lived before you.
Hello everyone, I hope you're okay. I read a great article this week about the power of and importance of humor, even when we are facing some really challenging and difficult times like we are now. In fact, the writer of the article talked at length about Viktor Frankl. Frankl was an Austrian psychiatrist and neurologist in the 1920s. And in the 1930s, he, along with everybody in his family, was arrested and hauled off to a concentration camp for no other reason except they were born Jewish. Dr. Frankl's father and brother were both killed while they were in a concentration camp, and his mother and his wife both died while they were in a concentration camp before they could be put to death. In that situation, when Frankl was being starved nearly to death, beaten frequently, had no hope of escape, he said he realized even in that situation the importance of maintaining a sense of humor. It was a coping device. He and others there realized that. I don't mean they sat around laughing all the time, but they would from time to time have a brief moment for there to be some levity in their conversation and in things they saw. They might simply exchange a wink, a glance, a smile, a laugh. And he said that became an important, one of the tools they used to get through the days in those difficult times. So we need to keep our sense of humor. And in that regard, I wanted to tell you about something I saw this week and some of you saw because I put it on Facebook and so did some of you. The Dean of Canterbury Cathedral during this lockdown has been filming each week a worship service to put online there at the cathedral. The filming is done there in the garden by another employee of the cathedral while he sits in a chair in the garden with a table beside the chair. And this week, while the filming was being done, on the table by his chair, as he did his homily, this very distinguished reverend was teaching and preaching. There beside him on the table was a tray with all things needed for a cup of coffee, including a small pitcher of cream. While the dean was giving his sermon, his cat came near the table, leapt into a chair, leapt up on the table. We can see all of this happening while the dean is preaching, oblivious to it. And the cat stood over the pitcher of cream, and the cat almost smiled at us. The cat realized he couldn't get his big head into the pitcher of cream. The cat's name was Tiger. And he dipped his paw into the cream and licked it and kept repeating that until he emptied out the pitcher, all the while the dean was preaching. So that video has now been watched by tens of thousands of people around the world, and not for the sermon, but for Tiger the cat. So I've been trying to figure out a way to get our cat, Teeny, into my sermon, so maybe we might grow our watching crowd, but she's a bit bashful and hasn't come into the scene yet. Anyway, a reminder of, in these difficult times, that humor is an important part of coping for difficulties. By the way, speaking of difficulties and keeping our sense of humor, we are living in a time, and I made this list this week, and it's not going to be complete. You add to it. I made this list this week of all the things that we are facing in our lives, and so many of you have said to me throughout each week, when is this going to end? You've said it in despair. You've said it in lament. You've said it searching for hope. And so I made this list. See what you think. We can't be with loved ones who are hospitalized. If we're hospitalized ourselves, we can't have anyone present with us. And more of our doctor's visits are being done via telemedicine, and medical professions, caring professionals, and first responders' lives have been impacted in extremely stressful ways. We can't visit nursing homes. We can't have funerals in the traditional sense. I've had two, and it's very strange and very different in these days. We can't have worship and Sunday school and other church activities as usual. We can't have community gatherings. We can't have school in traditional fashion. that decision was made this week for the fall. Our children and grandchildren's lives are being affected in ways we really can't fully comprehend from their young perspectives. And while some businesses are doing okay and maybe even thriving, in fact, most are being impacted negatively, and others are struggling to survive or may even have to close. Mental health experts are telling us that we are increasingly in despair. 70% of those polled are indicating that's the case, and loneliness is beginning to be a factor that is affecting health and well-being. All of this to ask this question: do you ever feel like your life has been put on hold? So many of you ask again, when is this going to end? And I don't want you to throw things at me, but the answer to that question is probably not soon. In fact, yesterday there were another 75,000 cases in the United States of positive COVID tests. In fact, we have several more in our own community and in our own church who are ill. Yes, it's true that not as many people are dying from it. However, we are reading the damage that it can do to your body that can last the remainder of your life. So be careful out there still. And speaking of life being put on hold, I get to hear from people all the time from across the country, because Catherine and I have lived all over the country and been in churches around the country. So this week I heard from a friend in another church, my age, a former parishioner. His wife had been through surgery for cancer and through chemotherapy, and she is now done with the chemotherapy, but it has really put their lives on hold because she's been very sick and she's feeling a bit depressed about it all, and they are feeling in despair. Another friend was in touch a couple of weeks ago to say that her father was dying and it was in hospice care, and she didn't know how long that would last. And they were both feeling like life had truly been put on hold. It was difficult. It was hard. Both of those friends, though, who got in touch are the kind who are able to find humor even in difficult situations. That brought me to some thinking about the Israelites when they crossed the Red Sea, when they escaped from the Pharaoh, when they were on the other side and all of Pharaoh's army had been destroyed by the sea when it went back upon them as they crossed. On the other side of the Red Sea, suddenly, the Israelites murmured against Moses for bringing them out there to die when there was no food, there was no water. They begged to go back to Egypt, back to slavery, back to captivity, back to hard labor. They preferred that over the unknowing. They felt like their lives had been put on hold. And sure enough, for a generation, they would wander around in the wilderness, unable to get to the land of milk and honey God had promised. In fact, Moses died before they would arrive in that land and be free. Other times in the Israelis' history, we come up with some other difficulties. For example, their offspring, many generations later, were taken captive and hauled off into captivity for another generation. They also felt their lives were put on hold, and they felt tremendous despair. They had always been taught that if God was blessing them, their lives would be filled with great possessions, children, large families, big homes, herds, money, wealth. But time and again, they found themselves in captivity, and life was hard, and they felt everything was on hold. So when Jesus comes on the scene and begins his preaching and teaching and healing and starts to gain everybody's attention, Jesus teaches them some things they had never heard. For example, all of their lives, they had been taught that their sins, their inability to live righteously, their failure to live by the 613 rules that they had received in training as children by which they had to live and function. Nobody could do it. It was too hard. No one could succeed. No one had the strength. No one had the drive. So once again, when Jesus comes on the scene, they are living in occupied territory. They are being robbed by Roman tax collectors who had no ethics, no integrity, no compassion. Those tax collectors stole from the poor people of the day to whom Jesus was preaching and teaching. So, with their heads hanging low, Jesus gave his first sermon to these people living in occupation, thinking they had failed and God had forgotten them. Blessed are the spiritually poor, for the kingdom of heaven will be theirs. Blessed are those who mourn, they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek and gentle, they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, they will be shown mercy. Blessed are those who are pure in heart, they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, they will be called the children of God. And blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness. The kingdom of heaven is theirs. Jesus preached this, and they heard this. It was like nothing they'd ever heard before. We're blessed now in our life of occupation, in our being robbed by these tax collectors, in our days of not being blessed, in our days of being slaves. We're being blessed. You mean we aren't cursed? You mean this is not our fault? You mean we haven't sinned? You mean we haven't fallen short? You mean God doesn't hate us all? Have you ever felt that way? Have you ever felt that way in your life when you were going through a difficulty or things were not working out the way you had hoped or planned or prayed? I do. I ask, why, Lord? What did I do wrong? Where did I fail? What have I not done? What have I not given? Where have I not gone? Do you ever feel that way? I especially love the relief I hear when Jesus says, when we feel a sense of grief in our faults, our grief when we've not succeeded in the way we thought we would, our grief about the things we've lost, our grief about painful times, our grief about suffering. I especially love the relief I hear when Jesus says, blessed are those who mourn, for you will be comforted. That caused me to think of a story this week that I just love. Somerset Maugham, Maugham, Somerset Maugham, was an English playwright. He was born in France in 1874. He died in 1965. He was one of 6 boys, the 4th to be born. His life, though, was very tragic. The family lived in Paris, France, because Somerset's father was British born, but was the solicitor, the attorney, who handled England's legal affairs for the British Embassy in Paris. What a place to grow up. What a way to grow up. While materialistically speaking, the family was well off there. They had every creature comfort imaginable. They lived what we would call a blessed life. But Their lives were eventually filled with tragedy. Somerset's mother, Edith, got tuberculosis as a young adult. In fact, when she got sick in those days, there was no cure. The doctor didn't know what to say. There was no medicine for it. So the doctor's prescription was this: have children. Have children. So she had 6 boys. She had 3 in rapid succession, and they went off to boarding school. So by the time Somerset was born, he was the 4th. There were no children in the house. His mother was depressed and weary and sick and felt her life had been put on hold. With all the difficulties and challenges in their lives, with her sadness and depression, his father always away and working, Somerset developed a stuttering problem. When he tried to talk, the words would not come out. He stammered horribly. One day as a little boy, he shared with his mother how much it bothered him that he stuttered and the words wouldn't come, and everybody laughed at him, and how much he hated it. His mother said, "Well, son, perhaps you should go to your room tonight and in your prayers, pray to God and see what God says, what God does." He took those words to heart, and as a little boy that night, he got by his bedside on his knees and prayed to God that he would never stutter again. He fell asleep. The next morning at sunrise, he woke up, ran down the stairs, and jumped to the kitchen table where his mother was setting his breakfast there. And his mother said, "Good morning, son." And little Somerset, 5, 6 years old, opened his mouth and said, "Good, good, good, good." And the words wouldn't come. And he bowed his head in despair. And Somerset never prayed again. He felt his development and growth and future was on hold. It was hard. Shortly after that, his mother gave birth to another son and another son. And one of those sons, the last son, died a couple of days after he was born. And Somerset's mother, their mother, died too. Somerset, his father was busy, sent his son off to England to be raised by an uncle who was a vicar in a small parish. The vicar was not married. He was older. He was cold, aloof. He did not know how to encourage and be supportive of a little boy with a stuttering problem. Somerset felt his life was hard and on hold, and no one cared. He wondered what he had done wrong. Jesus said to anyone who grieves, to someone like Somerset, to someone like you or me, in our search for relief, "Blessed are those who mourn, for you will be comforted." It may not come as soon as we like. The hard times may last a lot longer than we would prefer. The kind of life we had may not be ours for a while, but Jesus said we will not always be living in occupation. A new day will come. Our grief will be relieved. Blessed are those who mourn, for you will be comforted. In these challenging days, remember those things. Would you pray with me? Lord, our grief for many of us runs deep. We long for the life we had just a few months ago. We wonder when these strange times will end. Our children are restless and bored and frustrated. Our parents are feeling worn down. Grandparents too. Those who run businesses are in distress of all sorts. For many, finances are difficult and days are hard. For those enduring illness and hospitalization, there is so much distress in the aloneness. For those in our nursing facilities and their loved ones who can't see them, the days are so very difficult. The list of things that seem hard now is seemingly endless. We do feel a sense, many of us, of despair. We are, in a way, in mourning, like your people so often in the past. Help us always to remember that blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. We make our prayer in the name of the resurrected Christ. And all of God's people said, Amen, and God bless.